In this video, we're going to start talking about the circumference of a circle. The circumference is the distance around a circle. It's similar to perimeter of a figure or a shape. Because we don't have sides in a circle, we can't add up a bunch of numbers. So we do need a formula to help us calculate the circumference or the distance around a circle. If we know the diameter of a circle, which is the distance across the circle through the center, we can use a formula that is circumference equals pi times diameter. So we're going to take the value of pi times the diameter. Now if you're asking yourself, what is pi? Pi is a constant. It is a value that always has the same value in pi or the same number. We are going to use 3.14 as our approximation of pi. Pi is a unique number in that it doesn't end and it doesn't repeat. Because of that, we want to kind of shrink it down to a value that we can compute with. That's going to be 3.14. So whenever we see a pi symbol and we want to calculate a value that's approximate, we're going to use 3.14 in its place. If we know the radius of a circle, we can use a slightly different formula. We can use a formula that's circumference equals 2 times pi times the radius. Now, why do we have two formulas? They're essentially the same formula. We can use either or. The reason they're the same is if I take the radius and I multiply it by 2, so I take the radius and I multiply it by 2, I get the diameter of the circle. So instead of in this formula doing 2 times, use the diameter. You can memorize both, you can use both. I tend to use this one more often than not, and the key to using that one is I always have to calculate the diameter. So going back, in place of this pi symbol, we're going to replace that with 3.14 to find our circumference. So let's go ahead and look at a problem and how we would use that. Example 1, finding the circumference of a circle. I am given the radius of the circle. So I might choose this formula 2 times pi times r. And if I did that, I would get the same value as if I used pi times diameter. So let's see what that looks like. C equals 2 times pi, I'm going to put 3.14 in, times the radius, which is 7. And if I multiply those values together, 2 times 3.14 times 7, I get 43.96. I'm going to put centimeters on there. That is an approximate value. So because we used a rounded number for pi, we're going to get an approximate value. If I were to choose the other formula, pi times diameter, I just need to make sure that instead of using 7, I use the diameter amount. So the diameter would be 14. 2 7s, 2 times 7, 14. So here what I can do is pi times d is the same as d times pi, so I'm going to put the number first always. So 14 times pi. This is what we call the exact form. Exact form is a number where it's not rounded, it's just using the pi symbol. Has its purpose. I'm okay with either or. I'd prefer that we kind of work with the approximate just because it's a little more calculated for us at this point. So how would I get to the approximate version? I'm just going to do 14 times 3.14. So I'm going to replace pi with the number 3.14. When I multiply these together, I'm going to get 43.96 centimeters. The same value from the other circumference formula. And they should be equivalent. They should be equal. And this is our approximate value. If you're like, what are you talking about? Exact, approximate? Go with approximate. Always just multiply the numbers together to get that value. Example 2. Here I'm given the circumference, so I'm going to use that circumference formula right off the bat. I'm just using pi times diameter. In this case, I'm going to replace diameter and write it first, so that's going to be 26 times pi. That's my exact form. Could leave it like that, but I'm going to always calculate the approximate as well. So I'm going to do 26 times 3.14. 26 times 3.14 is 81.64 inches. And again, I'm dealing with circumference, which is a distance, so I'm just using the measurement. Part C, find the circumference of a circle with the diameter of 12 meters. Here I have no diagram, just kind of a description. Diameter, 12. Awesome. C equals pi times diameter. My diameter is 12, so 12 pi is my exact form. And if I multiply that together, 12 times 3.14, I end up with 37.68 meters. Again, I can do this or this. I'm going to suggest we kind of go to this approximate value. D, find the circumference of a circle with a radius of 5 inches. I'm given the radius 5 inches, so I know R equals 5. I could use my circumference formula that involves R. I like to stick to 1, so I only have 1 to memorize. So I'm going to convert this to a diameter which is 2 times larger. Now that I have this, I can go ahead and use circumference equals pi times diameter. Diameter is 10, pi on the end, that's my exact form. Multiply those together, 31.4 inches. And that's my circumference there. I'll look at example 2. Finding the radius and diameter if I know the circumference. Okay, so we're going to do a little solving here, a little reverse thinking. The circumference of a circle is 28.26 centimeters. So that's C. And I want to know what R is, and I want to know what diameter is. All right. I'm going to start with, because I'm dealing with circumference, I'm going to go to a circumference formula. Pi times diameter. This is kind of like when we did simple interest, and we always started with the formula, and then we substituted in what we knew. So for C, I'm going to substitute the circumference, which is 28.26. That will be equal to pi, which I know is 3.14, times diameter. Now I have a one-step equation, so I'm going to solve this by drawing a line and undoing the multiplication of 3.14. Division. 3.14 divide by 3.14. This gives me a diameter of 9. So there's my diameter. To get to my radius, I divide by 2, giving me 4.5. And I should have a unit on here. Let's go centimeters and centimeters. B, the circumference of a circle is 10 pi. All right, there's that exact form again. We'll see how we can deal with that in this case. What is the radius and diameter? So again, I'm talking about circumference, so I want to go with a circumference formula. 10 times pi, or 10 pi, I could multiply this together and use that value. It's about 31.4. In this case, I'm going to actually just see what happens if I put that in C's place. Here, if I want to get rid of pi, which is 3.14 times d, and over here I have 10 times 3.14, I'm just going to divide by 3.14. And on this side, I'm going to divide by 3.14. And what we'll notice is those will all cancel each other out, leaving us with the diameter being 10 inches. Cut that in half, radius equals 5 inches. So that was starting with the circumference and finding the diameter and the radius versus having the diameter and radius and finding the circumference. Why don't you pause the video here and try the 3 try-it problems. Alright, looking at the first try-it problem, I have a circle with a radius of 4. If the radius is 4, I know the diameter is 8. The reason I want the diameter is I'm going to use C equals pi times D. If you used the other formula, you would still get the same answer that I will get. This is 3.14 times the diameter of 8. This gives me a final value of 25.12 meters. In the second try problem, I have the diameter, 10. Using my circumference formula of pi times d, I'm going to get 3.14 times 10, which is 31.4 miles. And the last one, this is where we go in reverse. I'm given circumference, I want to find diameter. So C equals pi d. This time I get to plug in a number for C, so it's 12.56 equals 3.14 d. Divide both sides by 3.14 so that they cross out. And I end up with a diameter of 4. If you have any questions on either of those 3 problems, now would be a good time to check in. Now let's look at applying this idea to 2-word problems. The minute hand on a clock is 7 inches. How far will the end of the minute hand travel after 1 rotation? Alright, so I have a clock, and I have a minute hand that is 7 inches. So I know that R, the radius of the circle, is 7. I'm interested in this going around the clock. So my diameter is 14. Circumference equals pi times d, which is 3.14 times 14. This gives me a circumference of the clock of 43.96 inches. So that is the distance that the minute hand will travel, the end of it, this point here, in 1 rotation. How far will it travel in 4 hours? Well, that's going to be, every hour is 1 rotation, so this is 4 rotations. So I'm going to take the distance it travels in 1 rotation, the unit rate, and multiply it by 4 rotations. This gives me an answer of 43.96 times 4, total distance of 175.84 inches. And our last problem. Here's a bike from the 1800s. If you ride this bike 600, how will a larger tire rotate? All right, I'm talking about rotation. My final distance, or my total circle. Because I'm talking feet, I want to convert this diameter to feet. There's 12 inches in 1 foot. So 60 inches divided by 12 is 5 feet. That is my diameter. So circumference equals 3.14 pi times 5 feet. That gives me a total of 15.7 feet. That's 1 rotation of the tire. I want to know how many times that goes into 600. So I'm going to take 600 feet, the total distance rode, divided by the tire's rotation, and that gives me 38.21 times. Hope this helps with circumference of a circle.